was said before the break, actually, there will be no direct hackathon, but Phil Ewels instead will talk today still about running the NF Core pipelines and contributing to NF Core. And to my understanding, that was more a hands-on presentation than a real presentation. And yeah, I think I passed the video straight away to you because the introduction was done yesterday already. After that really nice talk, everybody knows you anyway.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you very much. It's nice to be back. Hopefully you're not sick of me just yet. So let me see if I can just share my screen. There we go. Hopefully everybody can see that. Yeah, so when I talked to Jose originally about the sessions, I thought it might be a bit much to try and talk about introducing NF Core and running pipelines and developing pipelines and everything in one long slot. I thought that might be kind of too much for anyone to pay attention to in one stretch. So I said I'd break it up into two, and gave this session also the title of kind of running NF Core pipelines. But when I came to preparing the talks, I ended up putting most of that in yesterday's talk. So I think I've covered running pipelines hopefully fairly comprehensively already, so I won't talk about that too much today. I'll instead talk about a bit more about how to develop Nextflow pipelines for NF Core, and maybe go into a bit more detail about what all the boilerplate code that we provide in the template is doing and how all the automation behind NF Core works, because again, that's a bit different to kind of core Nextflow, if you like. Excuse me. Well, I have fewer slides today deliberately, so I would be very happy to take questions and kind of take this more in the direction that you guys are interested in. So please, if someone can flag me down if there are any questions as I'm going along, I'd be quite happy to take that or go into more detail on any topic. I was following along Harshil's talk this morning as well. It was really good. And I'm going to try not to duplicate too much of what he said because he's also gone over stuff. So I don't want to completely saturate you. But let's kick off anyway, and we'll see how this goes. Worst case scenario, we finish a little bit early and you guys can start your hackathon. So developing with NF Core. So I kind of jump straight in. If you want to develop a new NF Core pipeline from scratch, rather than adding to an existing pipeline, there's broadly speaking kind of three big steps that you need to go through. The first step is the most important. I mentioned this yesterday. I'm going to hammer on about it a bit more, which is it's really important to join the NF Core community, get involved, get talking to people as soon as possible. I get a bit nervous when people present pipelines which are pretty fully developed and say, oh, we'd like to add this to NF Core at some point, because adding a pipeline to NF Core when it's already fully written is often quite a difficult process. But if you get involved straight away, before you do too much work at all, it streamlines the whole thing. You can develop it with the community rather than just adding it to the NF Core website at the end, which are two kind of slightly distinct things. So my strongest recommendation is to get involved with us as soon as possible and kind of get chatting to everybody. There's no signature required, no credit card details. As I said yesterday, we're kind of primarily on 4 channels: GitHub, Slack, Twitter, and increasingly YouTube. And you can find information about all of this on our website, including a link to get a Slack invite. So please hop on there if you haven't already. Once you've joined Slack and you kind of figured your way around a little bit, the channel which is most relevant here is one called New Pipelines, which you'll find in the channel browser. And this channel is dedicated specifically to discussions about potential new pipelines. So if you have an idea for something that you'd like to work on, go there and just give a quick overview of what you're thinking about. And it's not like a formal application procedure or anything, just have a discussion with us. In some cases, people come with ideas and we say, great, but this sounds quite a lot like this pipeline already. Could you just add that missing functionality to that pipeline? And then that's generally great for everybody because it's less work for you, and you get help with how to do that. A lot of the time we say, yeah, that sounds great. We don't have anything like that so far. That would fit really nicely, in which case it's kind of green light, go ahead. And another reason for doing this is that if anyone else comes along with a similar idea a month later while you're still writing the code and haven't really done anything, then we say search the Slack community and the people will find your messages. So again, it stops people from duplicating pipelines and working on top of one another, and instead everyone can work together, which is the whole point of NF Core. Right. So everyone's happy with this idea and super excited to see what you're going to do. So then the next thing really is to create a new pipeline using the NF Core template. There's a command for this called NF Core create, and when you run it, it's very quick. It will just take you through a few steps. Make sure you've got the latest version of NF Core tools first, and it will ask you for a name, a short description, and a contact author. So every NF Core pipeline should, in theory, have at least one contact person who's sort of responsible for that pipeline. That can change over time, and it's not super important, but it's nice to have that listed on the README and the license and stuff, so that there's kind of a primary author. And then basically it will just take the NF Core template. For those of you who are familiar with this, it's written in Python using Ginger templating library, and it's all that's packaged within the NF Core Python package itself, and it will spit all of that out, inserting your variables and workflow name all over the place into a directory for you. It goes a little bit further as well. Unless you tell it not to with a command line flag, it will also initialize a Git repository in that directory. And it will set up a couple of branches for you and make the first commit in the various branches for you. This I'll come on to in a second why this is important, but it's just because we really want you to start the repository Git history with the NF Core template. You can see here in the screenshot then that it has a couple of example commands here. So then you would go to GitHub on your personal user account, create a new blank repository without it initializing with a README or anything, add that URL, and then push all, and that will push all the branches it's made. And then you're good to go, and then you can start writing. And as a little reminder saying, please come and talk to us if you haven't already. So why do we bother creating a Git repository and stuff? Why can't you just do that yourself? This comes down to how we handle updates. So we maintain this template, NF Core pipeline template, and it gets new changes all the time. And the template is a fully fledged pipeline, basically. I think it runs fast QC, then multi QC. So it's got two processes in, which you're free to remove, but it kind of just some dummy content in there. And it also helps that the pipeline can actually be run. It also has processes for collecting the software versions, for reporting things, for generating documentation automatically. And then it has all the boilerplate code, for example, which will print the log message at the top of the pipeline when you run it. It will get all the NF Core configs from that institutional configs repository. It will do a whole raft of different things, as well as all of the automation with the continuous integration, container images with Docker Hub. I'll walk through some of this in a bit more detail in a moment. So the pipeline comes with all of that stuff. And of course, many of these things will change, and we'll figure out ways to improve it over time. And Nextflow itself is developing the whole time. So this template is not a static thing by any means. We need to be updating it the whole time. We have now 42 pipelines, I think I said yesterday. So if we update the template, all of those 42 pipelines will start falling behind the template. So we need a way to keep all of those in step with the most up-to-date version. And the way we do this is with an automated synchronization method. So what I have here is actually one of the supplemental figures from the NF Core paper, and it shows the 3 branches which every NF Core pipeline has. Master, which is the default branch for most Git repositories, has the idea is that only ever has stable code on. So the last commit on master should always be the commit that's in the most recent release. So the reason for this is because it's the default branch. So if somebody does Nextflow pull pipeline name, it will pull master, and we want it to pull the most recent release. We then have a branch called dev, short for development, which is the most kind of current up-to-date code. Again, that should be semi-stable because we should be reviewing all the pull requests as they come into dev. So that should be usable. And of course, pipelines that have not yet had a first release, that's the main place you want to be running. And in fact, pipelines before their first release, we set dev as the default branch. So again, if you do Nextflow pull, it pulls dev. Finally, the thing that's a bit more strange is we have this branch which is called template in capitals. And this branch doesn't have any custom pipeline code at all. When you ran that nfcore create command, it made this first commit up here. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but we've got our first commit. And then it also made this branch, which shares this commit. And this means that there's a shared history between these two branches, which is really, really important. And then what happens is you forget about that. You never touch it. And when we do a new release of the nfcore tools template, it will automatically go out to every single repository, look for a branch called template, and it will completely delete all the files which are there, which are just the vanilla output from nfcore template, after passing what you put in for your name, description, and author. And then it will run nfcore create again with those same inputs. And because Git is clever about what's happened to the files, then Git will know which things have changed between these releases of the tools. Once you have that new commit there, then we can have a pull request is automatically generated to dev from template, which you can merge directly, or you can do on your own fork by pulling in this commit and then merging. And what this does is when it works well, you get a nice clean commit, pull request, sorry, with just a bunch of changes which should pretty much mirror what's happened in the upstream template. And this automation then makes it fairly easy for all pipeline authors to keep their pipelines up to date with the central template. This keeps happening, so you keep this branch open, and every time there's a new release, you get a new commit and a new pull request. And what's quite nice is if you never got around to merging this, if there's another tools release quite quickly afterwards, that same pull request will be updated. So you can see kind of all the tools releases coming out and what's changing over time. So this gets merged into dev, so dev stays up to date with the upstream template, and then you do releases of dev into master. Okay. Before I go on to that, I want to go do I've got a little treat for you today. I like to live dangerously, so I thought what's the best way to make this quite dry topic a bit more interesting is to live on the edge of my seat and try and do this process of a release of nfcore tools live, because I need to do it anyway. So let's see if I can skip over here. Move this out of the way. Up in this tab here, this morning, well, the last couple of weeks, we've been preparing a new version of tools. There's a pretty urgent bug that needs updating because GitHub Actions have changed their policy about one of the plugins that we use. So all the continuous integration tests on all nfcore pipelines are currently failing since yesterday. So we need to push this out ASAP. And you can see here, I've prepared a release on tools. I've merged into master, and I've got a changelog. So when I hit publish, hopefully GitHub Actions will spin up a set of automation and try and synchronize every single nfcore pipeline. And we can watch that in real time. And hopefully it won't blow up spectacularly in my face. But this is one of the most complex pieces of code I've ever written, so it does quite often fail. So let's see what happens. I'm going to hit publish. Right, we have a release. So now if I go to tools, I can go to actions, and hopefully there should be sync template. There we go, it's triggered. That's a good start. The first step gets a list of all the pipelines from the nfcore website. You can see it's got a JSON document there. And hopefully we should see all the new downstream actions spinning up. Here we go. So there's one for each pipeline. Amazing. Let's click on attack seek. There'll be at least one failure because I think this pipeline doesn't have a template branch. So I'm expecting that to fail. But hopefully most of the other actions here should pass. I'm talking about GitHub Actions here, by the way, while we wait for this to go, kind of assuming everyone knows what this is. So for those of you less familiar with the world of kind of GitHub automation, you might have heard of Travis CI, which is kind of a predecessor to GitHub Actions, or what's the other one? Circle CI. All of these are very similar things. CI stands for continuous integration. And basically, these are systems mostly for doing testing of code. So every time you push a new Git commit and you change it can run some tests on the code to make sure you haven't broken anything, which is, of course, incredibly powerful. With GitHub Actions, which came out about a year and a half ago, it's a bit more flexible than that. You can run a lot of stuff. You basically have a custom Docker image that you can run in, as well as other stuff. And you can trigger massive amounts of automation. And so we use GitHub Actions now a lot in all of the different NF core pipelines. And it's great because it just works by default. So if you fork one of these repositories to your personal account on GitHub, it will automatically, all these actions will be running, doing everything from checking pull requests to doing more complex things like this for the synchronization, which is not on the pipeline level, this is just on the tools level. All right, we're starting to get some ticks appearing. So if we look at the log that was showing, we run synchronization. This is running actually an NF core tools here, and you can see it's running a specific command on here. So it's saving a log file. It's saying it should be coming from branch dev. I want it to open a pull request. The username I want it to open a pull request with is called NF core bot. We've got some secrets and some hidden environment variables that you can't see. And this is the repository it should push to. So you can see the authentication token is hidden, thankfully, because this is being broadcast to YouTube. And you can see here it's kind of gone through a bunch of stuff, and it's updating a template branch. And what's really nice is you can see it's created a pull request here. So if I click that link, we can see this pull request has been opened on AttackSeek. It's already got a comment 33 seconds ago by someone in the audience, perhaps. And we can see that it's updated a bunch of files. And these are all the different updates from the NF core template, which have been in this release. So this is super cool. And I'm glossing over the fact that there's loads of merge conflicts which need to be manually resolved, which is very often the case. So this the part of merging this is a manual step, and always will be, I think. But for people like Harshal who maybe don't know how to handle this, there's a big page of documentation on the NF core website explaining everything I've just described, and giving you a step-by-step workflow of how to actually resolve all of this as a pipeline developer. Cool. All right, I'm happy. I can relax a bit now. Deep variant failed as I predicted, but everything else looks like it worked. So I just created, 41 pull requests, click of a button. I love automation. So what happens if you did not use NF core create? Maybe some of you in the audience are feeling a bit uncomfortable now because maybe you have a fairly mature pipeline that you really would love to add to NF core, but you didn't use NF core create for this first ever commit. You have two options. One is the kind of the nuclear option, if you like, which is to start again and just use NF core create and copy all of your pipeline code over. Just by copying and pasting into the template all the processes in the config, that process is usually very quick. And then you have used NF core create and everything works. And so that's, in terms of amount of work, that's by far usually the simplest and quickest to do. The downside of that is that you have to have a totally new repository, Git repository. So you have to delete everything you have already and start from scratch. And so you've lost all of that nice Git history. So you don't have attribution for who added what over what time. You'll just have like one commit adding a ton of code. So it is possible to kind of keep that history and convert into NF core. The key thing is you need to have this template branch, and it needs to have a commit, which is a kind of vanilla commit from the template. And that commit needs to have a shared history with master or with one of the other branches. Making this branch is quite easy. So there's documentation about all of this. You can do retrospectively, here we go. You do git checkout orphan, and that creates a special type of Git branch, which is just totally separate. It's like totally parallel tracks. And then you can run that, and then you have your branch, which is great. But then when you try and do merge, Git will complain and say that there's no shared history. So you can then tell it with down here somewhere, allow unrelated histories, which is a special flag which you run on a command line. And then Git will try and merge all of it together. Usually this is a bit of a messy process because you need to kind of harmonize all these two separate code bases and it actually makes them kind of overlap. But it is possible, sometimes without too much work, sometimes with a lot of work. And once you've solved that, then you've merged this in, and then you have a shared commit history with template. And from then on, these automated synchronizations will always work again. So it's a once process, but it is sometimes a bit painful, just as a heads up. So always best to use NF Core Create if you can. Right, still automation, still NF Core commands. This time instead of sync, we're doing NF Core lint. And this is something that runs on those GitHub Actions workflows every single time we make any change. So if I go to my kind of current favorite pet pipeline, which is a methyl-seq pipeline, there we go, the new pull request has just been opened here as well. I can look in this pull request, which I've been playing around with today, where a lot of the tests are failing. Maybe it's better if I pick one where, because GitHub, if one test fails, it will immediately cancel all the other running tests. So if I find one where the tests are passing, then I can look at the lint command. So this is GitHub Actions again, and it's running here, and NF Core, and it runs the NF Core lint command here. Okay, and now with the new update from that release I just did, this will be nice and colored. So you can see it tests here every single time. And I can also do that if I go to, let's see if this works, do NF Core lint, and hey, there you go. Because I just updated NF Core tools, one of the things we did in this release was we deleted a file and added a check to make sure that you've deleted the file and updated to the template correctly. So I ran lint, and immediately it found this file which shouldn't be there and failed and exited straight away and stopped all the downstream tests. So and when I try and make a new pull request, this will fail in the same way until everything's working again. So the NF Core lint command is our way of enforcing that all the different NF Core pipelines follow our guidelines. You can see that when you get this log here, so I can run this locally as much as I can, and that's a part of a good development cycle to always be running this and checking that it's always passing. So, and I can follow this link if it's in the terminal, but if I hold Command because I'm on the Mac, or Control if you're not, it will take me to the web page which describes this specific test, and it describes what it looks for and why it does what it does. So I can find this file, push Docker Hub, and it explains why this failed. So NF Core lint is a really powerful way to check that your pipeline is up to scratch, and basically, because it runs on GitHub Actions, unless there's a little green tick on a pull request, you can't merge a pull request, and mostly it's not ready to be reviewed by anyone until all the tests are passing. It's kind of a general rule of thumb. Of course, you can ask for help. One of the things on this screenshot you'll see is that there's lots of warnings. So you can have warnings which are just helping you out, saying that maybe this is wrong, but it's not actually a hard failure. So warnings are allowed. And you can see that there's some warnings up here saying that there's a Conda package update available. So the tests actually check Conda for every single package to see if there's a new version. So you might get warnings like this. And then you can see these are to do with to-do comment string. Now, what this is when you run NF Core Create, that template has a whole bunch of comments littered throughout the code. And these are there to try and help you as a newcomer when you're creating a new pipeline. So you know which of those files you should be editing and what you need to add. So here, this is in usage documentation in a markdown file. And you can see there's a comment here saying you should document the required command line parameters. This is out of date, actually, because that should be in the schema. but you get the idea that there's lots of these comments kind of all through the code. And it basically, especially if you're using a code editor that has an integration for this, you can get a nice list of the to-do comments and just kind of work your way through them, and then to get you up and running. And the warnings serve that same function there, that you can kind of see all the ones that you might have missed and respond to them. So that's hopefully a really nice kind of easy introduction into your new pipeline of where to get started. Yeah, and when it runs on GitHub Actions. This is something very new, actually, which I'm quite proud of, which is as of a few seconds ago when I hit release, all NF Core pipelines, when they run that linting on GitHub Actions, the results will be posted as a comment to the pull request. This is super cool because those warnings don't fail the test. So if you get a little green tick, the vast majority of people, myself included, usually don't bother looking digging through and looking at the log output, because why would you at past? And so those warnings will often go ignored for a long time. But now, if there's any warnings or any failures, you should automatically get a comment added to your pull request with these results. So you can see a very quick overview of how your linting results are looking, and also then click on that details drop down and get a list of every single test about how it did, as well with a link through to where to read more documentation. So this is just a kind of, all of these are kind of nicety features that you get for free if you're using NF Core and developing with NF Core to try and make the whole workflow simpler. Okay. Schema, I'm not going to spend very long on this because Harshal described this this morning already, but this is something new that we brought in over the summer, where we basically came up with a new file and a new standard that we think is a good idea for Nextflow pipelines. We called it Nextflow schema.json, and we built this around an existing set of conventions for describing metadata about anything really, which is called a JSON schema. And the idea behind this then is that you have pipeline parameters like params.foo, which you can override with the command line to kind of customize how your pipeline's running. But pipelines can have a lot of these. So with a schema, we can do a couple of things. It's a centralized place to add documentation, which is then automatically rendered on the website. It also allows us to type the variables, which is not possible to do within Nextflow by itself. Nextflow treats every parameter as a string, generally, if you put it on the command line. But we can now say that this should be an integer or whatever. And this is used both in the launch interfaces that we've built around this schema, which have nothing to do with Nextflow. They don't actually use Nextflow to build those interfaces. It's just from the JSON file. And hopefully very soon, this will also be included in the NF Core pipelines as well. So they will immediately fail before running anything if any of the parameters look wrong. We can also do something similar where we look for unexpected parameters. So if you misspell one or use camel case instead of snake case, you'll find out immediately, rather than normally what happens is the pipeline runs without error, which is a bit scary. So this allows us to automate lots of stuff: validation, command line help, website help, documentation, and user interfaces. And there's some other cool stuff happening in other tools which are outside of NF Core, which will also build on the same file. So it's a really nice way to kind of make NF Core pipelines more accessible to the wider world through automation. JSON is really crap to write by hand. They're huge files. So we have this nice command which Harshal demoed this morning. I'll just demo again because I love it, and I spent a large chunk of time working on it. But this will prompt you, if I'd added any new parameters to the pipeline code here, it would have said, oh, I found this and it's not in the schema. Or if I deleted any, it might say, I found this in the schema, but not in the pipeline. Do you want to remove it or add it? And then, as Harshal showed, you have this nice interface here where we can drag and drop, so we can group things. So we've got all the different groups here. We can drag and drop the order. We can drag and drop the order of the actual parameters. You can set icons. So this is from Font Awesome, so I can search for science, get a nice test tube or something. I can actually add parameters in this interface if I want to, add new groups, and so on and so on and so on. And there's some niceties, like when you first run this, you'll have loads and loads of ungrouped parameters. So you can add a new group and then say, I want to add ungrouped parameters, and just do it by tick box. And this now has been refined fairly well because we've been using this on quite a few pipelines, and I think it works really, really well. And then when I click finish, as Harshal shows, then this the command line tool is constantly polling the website, and it will pick up those differences. So I think this is a really fun tool. I really enjoyed building this and working on this, and it's super powerful. Okay, so you've written or you used a NF Core create command to build your pipeline. You've added in all your custom code. You've been running NF Core lints and all the tests are passing. You've made your schema with NF Core schema build. Your pipeline is running beautifully, and you're ready to do your first ever release on NF Core. Those branches I told you about in GitHub, we have a couple of rules set up automatically. So pull requests that go to the dev branch must have at least one positive review. If I look at a quick pull request, then GitHub has a very nice interface here for reviewing open pull requests. So if I click on this is a really old one actually. I should probably sort this out at some point. I can look through all the code on files changed. I can click on a specific line of code, write comments, and I can give an approval or like a failure, basically request changes or a neutral comment. So before we merge to dev, we need to have at least one approval. And before we merge to master, we need at least 2 approvals. And we say that before we do a first ever release, we need a special kind of pull request, which is called a pseudo pull request, which is something we made up. So K-Mermaid this is a pipeline that's been used a lot in production. It's been around for a long time, but we're just getting it up for its first release now. And you can see here we've created a pull request called pseudo PR. And what I do to make this is we make a branch off the very first commit against what will be released. So that basically means that this pull request, it will never be merged, but it has all of the code that's ever been added to the pipeline. So it's like a ridiculously huge pull request because it's the entire pipeline. But this gives us this really nice reviewing interface where we can go through and make comments in specific places, suggest changes on the code anywhere through it. And we request that at least 2 people from the NF core community who are not involved in building the pipeline go through and do this and actually try and run the pipeline on their own systems. And we found from practice that this clears up loads of bugs, because if there's might work fine on your system, but if you've hard-coded a file path or something by accident or some remnant, then that might mean it fails on someone else's machine. So by doing this community review, this is how we achieve that kind of gold standard to make sure that these pipelines really do run anywhere for anyone. And also by going through with a manual check, we check that the guidelines are adhered to. So this pseudo pull request is can result in a lot of comments and changes and suggestions and a lot of improvements. Often kind of really helps pipelines. And when everyone's signed off on it, we just close it, and then basically your pipeline is kind of ready to go for its first release. We only do that on the first release. After that, pipelines still have to have 2 reviews, but we just kind of do that on just what's changed since the last release. And so it's much quicker. So then you make a pull request from dev to master. Some extra tests are run on that time. So the lint tests run with a --- release flag because it's going to the master branch and check for a few more things, such as version numbers, which don't have dev in and are stable and stuff like that. And then when all that passes, you merge it and then you do the release like you just saw me do on tools, but for the pipeline. We also say that you should set up a zenodo DOI for your pipeline. We do that once manually on the first release. And then after that, you can set it up so that every time there's a new GitHub release, it automatically creates a new zenodo DOI. And we also trigger full-size testing now on AWS. This, again, was mentioned a bit by Harshal earlier and has been a project that's been going on this year. And this is really nice because we have said since the start of NF Core that every pipeline should have a very tiny test data set with FASTQ files with just like a few thousand reads. And that's great and it runs really quickly. But of course, some pipelines have steps which just don't work with such limited data. If you're trying to do a de novo genome assembly, then it's not going to work with 100 reads. And so that testing is sometimes a little bit limited. And also some bugs only present when you're really handling large data sets. So the point of this test is very much the same as the profile test, but we have profile test _full. And the idea is you set that up with a kind of a realistic public data set, which could be gigabytes in size. And when you do the release, this fires off on Amazon and runs with AWS Batch and is monitored on NF Core on Tower. And then all of those results are publicly available for anyone to look at, both through the website, as Harshal showed. So if I go to one of the more recent pipelines, this hasn't yet been set up for every single pipeline, but I'm pretty sure it's here on the MHC Quant page, for example, and click on results, and we can see all, and it knows that release 1.6 had this commit, so it looks in this folder, and we know that we've got these results from this release. I can go back to an earlier release and there won't be any results there. So they're free to browse through to see if it's generating the kind of output you want. They're there so anyone else can just download the results to play around with and maybe compare to a different pipeline. And of course, because we have this benchmark set of results for every release of the pipeline, that allows us to monitor changes in the performance of the pipeline between releases. which is really important for centers such as ours, where we need to do accreditation for each pipeline release. So this hopefully...
Phil, may I interrupt you shortly?
Yeah, go for it.
Just noticed that there is a raised hand in the audience participant list. I wonder if Hossein would like to ask something, or is that just the artifact that the button is still there? Hossein? Apparently, no. So, sorry. Probably everything is clear, and the hand is just like that there. So please, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no worries. I'll carry on. Yes. So we have a full test data set for every release of every pipeline in theory in the future. Like I say, this is still pretty new, so it's not been set up for pipelines and won't be there on the older releases yet. And I need to renew that grant, as Harshal says, with AWS, so that it keeps running next year and they don't charge my credit card. So I think this is really powerful. Right. Yes, I was going to talk about modules a bit. This I'm going to skip over very lightly because Harshal did a great job of introducing this, and there was quite a lot of discussion about it. But as he said, there is already today a command called nfcore modules list, which will show you all the different DSL2 modules that we've written, just so you can see what's listed there. So it's very quick and easy. And if I go to I think I can do it here, it shouldn't matter. If I do module nfcore modules, first I just do so I've got nothing different on this pipeline, it's just there. I do nfcore modules list, then I can do see what's there. I can do nfcore modules install. Let's do bamstat, pick one at random. Let's see, oh, I need to give it a directory. So I need to say install it into this directory. And there we go. It didn't do anything very exciting here. It just downloaded a bunch of files into modules. Made a new directory called modules, then called nfcore, then called software, then called rcqc, then called bamstat. And in there we can see the files which it's copied from the nfcore modules repository. So this is not kind of groundbreaking, but of course makes it a bit easier just to install the tools. And as Harshal said, in the future, there's some kind of, if I do modules help, there's some ones that we've planned but not yet done, which, for example, check, which will run probably as part of the nfcore linting to make sure that you haven't modified those code, because it's literally copied into a repository. So you could go and modify those files, and then that would break the reproducibility with nfcore modules. So we check that you haven't done that, and to update to the latest version or a specific commit hash and things like that. So we're starting to build that tooling, and that will continue over the coming kind of months, or probably years. And we kind of track the metadata and stuff like this. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody. But yeah, and Harshal did this massive chunk of work and managed to get the RNA-seq version 2.0 release out just last week, I guess it was. And we're kind of treating this as our reference implementation, which is actually how all of NFCart, before NFCore existed, we had a bunch of pipelines at the NGI, which were called like NGI RNA-seq. And this is kind of how we started this whole thing, was we would build pipelines and then kind of see how well they worked. And after a bit of kind of a proof of principle that they're stable, and I started to build together these kind of templates and guidelines. And that was how NFCore, it wasn't done kind of top down from guidelines, it was done bottom up from pipelines. And we're intending to do the same thing again with DSL2. Like, we're not going to decide what principles people should do up front and then build. We want to build and figure out what the best principles should be from our experience. And RNA-seq is our first big effort to do this. And we're going to take what Harshal's written and the others in the NFCore community, which is working so beautifully, and we'll move that over into the NFCore template so that it's available then to all other pipelines. We're going to do a hard switch from DSL 1 to 2. So when that version, probably 2.0 of NFCore tools comes out, we will want all NFCore pipelines to update. We're not going to try and have DSL 1 and 2 coexist, because that's too much work. Right. that's the end of my slides. I can't remember how long I was meant to talk to. But hopefully I haven't gone over. As I say, there's a website. I've demoed it quite a lot and gone on about it. So go and join up NF Core Slack and hopefully stay part of the conversation. Even if it's just asking for help to run pipelines or asking questions about NF Core or getting actively involved in development of NF Core, it'd be great to have you as part of the community. And with that, happy to take any questions or go into more detail on anything. One of the things I was thinking of doing was talking through the different files that we have in an NF Core pipeline and like how the automation and stuff works. So if people are interested in that, let me know and I can kind of talk through that in a bit more detail. Otherwise, we can just start with hackathon.
All right, Phil. Thanks a lot for this really impressive presentation. I think it was not only impressive for NF Core, but also for the use of GitHub. That was already a presentation on its own, how to properly use it.
I love GitHub. You can probably tell that I'm the biggest fan of GitHub and automation.
You could get a hint from that. So it's so much more than just a versioning system.
Mm.
I have one question.
All right.
Yeah, thank you for the nice talk. I was wondering, the schema JSON files, they seem to be on the Nextflow level, in fact. Even if it's NF Core who added that, how could this be used also to make the documentation of the Nextflow pipelines?
Yeah, good question. So the reason that we chose JSON schema as a standard is that there are a lot of tools which already support JSON schema natively. So our hope is that other people can build websites, tools, interfaces, user interfaces, all kinds of stuff with existing kind of frameworks. If I do a Google search for JSON schema form, you'll find that there's like a whole bunch of different interfaces which already work with JSON schema. So your exact mileage may vary, but it should hopefully be not a huge job for you to build some kind of documentation around a schema. I'm maybe overselling that a little bit because some of the fields that we add into the schema are a bit custom, stuff like the logo. You know, we have some of our own fields in there, and depending on exactly what you want, you might need to do some customization, but something like that is certainly possible. It's kind of an interesting idea that you've brought up of having some kind of writing some kind of tooling to generate documentation from the schema. That hadn't crossed my mind at all, but that would be something we could always do with something like the NF Core tools. Is we could have like a documentation generator subcommand or something like that, like NF Core schema docs, which would then make a markdown file or an HTML file, which you could use for any pipeline and store anywhere. So yeah, maybe make a GitHub issue for that on NF Core tools, and we can have a think about it.
Thank you.
I have a question also. It's related to this. Is this JSON schema also used? Well, maybe this is more a question for Ivan or Paolo, but it's also used for NF Tower. This,
yeah.
I don't know.
So on two levels. So if I do, I think it should work with MHC Quant. So if I do launch and then launch again, okay, I need to do input.csv and I'll put in my email address. And I'll say faster, just so I've changed a couple of things. Hit launch. Then you can see there's this button here, which I added with the help of the Tower team. And what this does behind the scenes is that it's actually got a web form here, and you can see that there's some hidden form inputs with the stuff that I've just filled in. So when I click this is going to load Tower with these pre-filled, basically. So it loads the launch dialog, but with all the different inputs that I've put in from the NF Core website, as well as the pipeline name and version number that I selected and things like that. So then I can just select a compute environment here if I was logged in as a user that had a compute environment set up, and just hit launch. So that's a couple of clicks. And that's essentially using our infrastructure that we built. That's using the web form that we built on the NF Core website. But this schema can be used by anyone for anything. And I hopefully not going to give too much away by saying that the guys working on Tower have some plans of their own. I don't know if Evan or Paolo are here or want to jump in on that, but yeah, stay tuned.
Following up on the JSON file, I have another also question. What that is maybe really matter of taste or maybe even ignorant question, but why have you used actually JSON instead of YAML?
Yeah, so JSON schema can be written in YAML. In fact, I only found this out the other day that JSON can be loaded as YAML. So it's YAMLs are like a superset of JSON, which I never knew about until the other day when I accidentally used the wrong parsing function and found out that YAML.load worked on a JSON file. Yeah, so you're quite right. JSON schema could be written as YAML. I would say so. YAML. This is personal taste. I like to write YAML by hand, and I like to use JSON when I'm doing stuff programmatically. Basically, is what it comes down to. And we built interfaces to do all of this programmatically, so you never have to touch that file. So I would rather have it as JSON because it's a bit more strict, and I don't know. It would work fine in YAML as well. No particular reason.
Oh, are there any other questions?
Yes.
I think. Oh yeah, I just
had my hand up.
Yeah, I just checked that. I saw you. Go ahead.
I took it down already. I actually had a question. This is very interesting. You now only talked about if you want to add a completely new pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
What is kind of your what you would prefer? How if people want to add to already existing pipelines or they want to expand already existing pipelines, what is the procedure that you would prefer for people to either contact you on Slack first or to send an email to, say, the developer, or what would you, what is your preference?
Yep. So I mentioned this yesterday, but we're on NF Core, we're very keen on the idea of not having pipelines that overlap too much, so that we kind of can all kind of contribute and collaborate together on a single set of pipelines. So generally adding new features to existing pipelines is something we really encourage. You can generally, I would say, stay away from email. We like to try and keep all communication as open and transparent and findable as possible. So typically that's Slack, or it could be over GitHub by GitHub issues. So if you're thinking about whether you've got an idea and you're not sure whether it should be a new pipeline or an addition to a pipeline, then hop onto that Slack channel called New Pipelines, which is for exactly this discussion. Also, when you join the NF Core Slack, you won't be automatically added to these channels, but they are there. There's a channel for every single pipeline. So in fact, if I go to a pipeline page here, then you'll see on the right-hand side that there's a button saying ask a question on Slack.
Mm-hmm.
Also, as of that release I just did a few seconds ago, if you try and open a new issue on a pull request, you'll get a link there as well. So it's easy to find.
Yes.
So you hop on there and then you can ask questions about a specific pipeline and get feedback from all the people working on it.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much.
So how cooperative is the community in the sense of if somebody comes with a new idea of other easily people coming up and say, hey, that is exactly what I would lead as well, and start to join in there, or how is that generally going?
It varies a bit. Of course, everybody is busy. I don't think I've ever met a bioinformatician who's not overworked. So everyone is busy, and people often end up working on what they need or what they're kind of otherwise actively working on. And this is true of the pipelines themselves. And in fact, this is what we want for the pipelines. One of the criticisms I've heard at NF Core is leveled at NF Core is that there's like this big range of pipelines, and no one can be an expert in everything. But we don't try and be an expert in everything. I spend most of my time working on the core infrastructure, as you can hear from all the stuff about automation. And then we have kind of subgroups around each of the pipelines who are then kind of domain experts, because that's what they're working with every day. So when you come and jump onto some of the pipelines have loads of activity. The RNA-seq pipeline channel has, like, I don't know how many members. just because there are lots of people working on that. If you work on some super obscure field, then maybe there'll be fewer, or maybe that community hasn't yet found NF Core. So it varies a bit. But of course, we want everyone to be involved, and we're seeing more and more pipelines even outside of genomics now. We've got proteomics pipelines coming in and stuff. So that is getting better and better all the time. The other thing that's important to say is when you join Slack, you might see that there's a few of us who post a lot of messages. So if you're just looking at who's posting messages, you might kind of feel that there isn't loads of people. But from experience, I can say there are a lot of people who sort of lurk on the NF Core Slack and listen and are around without necessarily saying a huge amount. And so I'm often pleasantly surprised when people come and say, I'm interested in X or Y, and lots of people kind of jump out of the woodwork and be like, oh, I'd be actually really interested in following that as well. So it's always worth posting a message and asking. You don't lose anything. And if on a good day, you might find yourself a set of collaborators to work with.
All right, great. I just glance another time through the list of participants for raised hands. There is nothing in the chat. So I think for now, all uncertainties probably solved. No further questions.
I'll be around for a bit longer, so if you think of anything, then you can grab me on Slack, or are we doing breakout rooms again?
Yeah.
Actually, it will be now a room. So if you want, you can join, and if there are some people interested, they can also join there. And if not, you are also in Slack. So we have a dedicated channel for NF Core. So feel free also to ask him there. I mean, yes, and thanks a lot for the nice talks and very nice demos. I really enjoyed